Good evening, everyone. My name is Elana Kaminka, and before I start reading you my prepared remarks, I want to acknowledge the fact that I'm standing here in front of you as my children and children in Israel, in Palestine, and throughout the entire region are in safe rooms, the victims of yet another cycle of violence in our region. On October 7th, 2023, my beloved eldest son, Yanai, was killed by Hamas militants who poured through the breaches of the supposedly impenetrable fence between Gaza and southern Israel and shot his defensive post with a rocket-propelled grenade. He was a soldier, but he wasn't involved in the occupation or any other controversial activity. He was fulfilling the most basic role of a military, protecting innocent civilians from people trying to cause them harm. But the October 7th massacre did not happen in a vacuum. It was the result of decades in which Palestinians and Israelis alike have refused to do something very simple: acknowledge one another's humanity. The irony is that Yanai, who had not yet turned 21 when he was killed, deeply understood the power of showing love and empathy for the other. When he was in officer school, he was asked to write his leadership values. The first value that he wrote was loving the people you lead and making them feel loved. He elaborated further. Love is like a muscle, and if you exercise it enough, you'll be able to love everyone in your care. Yanai didn't only write those words, he lived them in action, spending his nights making rounds at his soldiers' guard posts and engaging them in deep conversation, getting to know each one as a human being, learning their unique challenges, emotional needs, and perspective. He understood that the first step in making someone feel cared for, loved, and protected is for them to feel seen and understood. Responsibility. Love and care for the people you lead, seeing the other. These are values that are absent from the hearts of the arrogant extremists who rule Israel today. There is no need to say more. The abyss between their leadership values and my son Yanai's is obvious. In that terrible week after October 7th, I felt a complete loss of control. The most basic role of a parent is to keep their child safe, and I hadn't been able to protect Yanai. We saw horrific pictures of young people, the elderly, parents and their children being murdered or taken hostage. My 16-year-old daughter came in our bed one night and asked, "What do we do if Hamas comes into our home?" And I had no answer for her. I live in a small town called Tzur Adasa, immediately adjacent to the Green Line, the border between Israel and the West Bank. Since I moved there in 2000, I've had a chance to do what very few Israelis do: get to know Palestinians. Learn about their lives. And in that process, I began to understand how torturous daily life is as a Palestinian living under Israeli rule. That the things that Israel does in the name of security actually undermine our security by stoking the cycles of violence. That it is possible and even critical for us to see each other as neighbors and behave towards another as such. Because as we saw on October 7th, no wall is high enough to contain the rage of people who've been systematically dehumanized. A few days after October 7th, I opened the local WhatsApp group with my Palestinian neighbors, and I was shocked to see a mirror image of the fear and suffering we were feeling in Israel. My neighbors hadn't participated in the atrocities of October 7th, but they were under complete lockdown and couldn't access basic supplies or medical care. They were terrified that they would be targeted by extremists bent on revenge. I was powerless to change my reality or theirs. And at that moment, I decided that the only thing I could control in my life is the type of person I want to be and I decided to write a letter to my Palestinian neighbors. This is what I wrote. To my dear friends and neighbors from Wadi Fukin, Husan, and Batil. These are terrible days for us all. I'm sitting Shiva from my beloved eldest son, 20-year-old Elana Kaminka, a boy with kind eyes that saw every human being, and my heart is shattered into pieces. Within this terrible grief and bereavement, I want to say to you that I see you. I know these are terrible days for you too, days of fear and dread. I'm writing to tell you that I want only good for you and that I'm worried about you like I'm worried about us all. Dear neighbors, I'm in pain now, deep pain, but I want to tell you that within this pain, my heart is open to you. I don't blame you for the deeds of Hamas, and I hope this cursed situation will somehow bring our two nations to at last learn how to live together with mutual respect so that there may be no more parents, Israeli or Palestinian, that must grieve for their sons and daughters. There is no other way. A short time later, I joined the Parent Circle Families Forum, a group of over 800 Palestinians and Israelis who have lost family members due to the conflict and are committed to nonviolence and reconciliation. I learned about the organization in 2018 through the experience of Yaqub Ra'abi, whose wife Aisha was murdered by Jewish extremists who threw boulders at their family car, one of which struck Aisha in the head and killed her on the spot, in front of her husband and 9-year-old daughter. As the granddaughter of Holocaust survivors, I was shocked when I heard their story. I couldn't believe that Jews would murder an innocent mother of 9. I felt compelled to join the condolence mission organized by another amazing organization, of which I am a proud member, called Tag Me'il, that supports victims of hate crimes in Israel and Palestine, regardless of whether those victims are Jewish, Christian, Muslim, or other. Yet as we set out, I was concerned. How would Yaqub feel about a group of Israeli Jews, some with a kippah on their heads, showing up at his home 2 weeks after Israeli Jews killed his beloved wife? Yaqub gave me an example of how to behave with love and dignity after a tragedy. He opened his home and his heart to us, and when we apologized for what happened, he said, "Why should you apologize? Yes, you're Jews, but you're not the Jews that killed Aisha. You're the people who came to my house to show me support." Yaqub joined the Parent Circle a short time after Aisha's death, and until the organization was banned by the Israeli Ministry of Education, yes, we're banned, he spoke with hundreds of Israeli school children about his commitment to peace and reconciliation, to protecting others from the pain he experienced. After losing Yanai, it was clear to me that I had to follow his example and join the Parent Circle as well. I want to make something clear. The reckless and unrelenting massacres of civilians in Gaza and the daily methodic harassment, displacement, and chronic violence directed at entire populations in the West Bank is not a different political opinion. It's a moral failure as great as the one that killed Yanai. Dehumanization is a vicious cycle. It can't be broken by dehumanizing others, but rather the opposite. What Israel is doing under the delusional zealots is not only morally bereft, it's paramount to national suicide. Systematically stripping Palestinians of all hope will be disastrous for Israelis, not only for Palestinians. I've given a lot of thought to the sanctity of life in the past 2.5 years, and I believe that it must be an absolute value. Because the moment you make exceptions and justifications, like any form of extremism, it's contagious and it spreads. We've seen that happen in Israeli society in recent years. We started with all life, but only for our people. We continued with all life among our people, but only if it serves certain purposes. Then all life, as long as we don't have to challenge our paradigms and ask ourselves difficult questions. It's a slippery slope that led us to a situation where hostages were abandoned, soldiers sent on missions without proper equipment and without a clear purpose, houses bombed with their residents inside, and children suffered from starvation. It's all connected to the yes, but of the sanctity of life. To truly sanctify life is not to accept the dictate of us or them, because in the end, we all pay the price, us and them. It's to rack your brain how to create them and us who can live safely and with dignity. To sanctify life is to refuse to accept the dictate that there's no choice, because there's always a choice. Yanai lived his short life according to a clear ethos of leadership. What you give is what you get. You can only demand of others what you're willing to give yourself. As the people of Israel, we must do the same. Yanai and all the victims of this conflict, Palestinian and Israeli, are worthy of a leadership that takes responsibility. They're worthy of repair. They're worthy of a thoughtful, reflective society that does not settle for empty slogans. A society that understands that dealing with a complex reality requires complex thinking, compromises, and compassion. They're worthy of a society that sanctifies life, all life. So where does this leave each of you sitting in the hall today? None of us has the ability to single-handedly change the destructive policies of the Netanyahu government, but we can each take responsibility for breaking the cycles of dehumanization. I mentioned that Yanai often gave up sleep to have those deep conversations with his soldiers. How can you manage without sleeping? We asked him, worried. Sleeping is psychological, he answered with the unique arrogance of young men. It's optional. But Yanai was also a biological being, and he dealt with his constant exhaustion by drinking copious amounts of Turkish coffee, no sugar. After he was killed, we asked his friends who came to pay their respects what they found most annoying about Yanai. We wanted to preserve his memory as a real human being, not a two-dimensional image of an idolized hero. His friends all gave us the same answer, one that we knew too well from home. Yanai drinks tons of Turkish coffee, and he never clears his cups with a sludge. When we visited his grave after 30 days, we poured hundreds of cups of Turkish coffee and asked everyone present to drink and leave the cups with the sludge on his grave. The purpose was double. First, to get back at Yanai for all the cups he didn't wash. He had a cynical sense of humor, and we thought he would have found that funny. But the second reason was that we suddenly saw an enormous amount of symbolism in the Turkish coffee. Turkish coffee is popular among all populations in the Middle East, Israeli and Palestinian, Jewish, Christian and Muslim, religious and secular. Coffee is an invitation for connection. You invite someone to meet for coffee, which is shorthand for a conversation. Turkish coffee is dark, it's bitter, and it has sludge on the bottom, as do real conversations, the ones we desperately need, but so often avoid. It isn't a frappuccino, or the shallow, meaningless conversations that taste sweet, but don't nourish our souls or help us address our challenges. We invited everyone there that day to adopt that symbolism, and I now want to extend that invitation to you. In your bags, you'll find one of these red cards, and inside are 2 packets of Turkish coffee. Following Yanai's example, invite someone who's different to have coffee with you. It can be someone from another religious or ethnic group, an opposing political philosophy, or even a neighbor or a colleague that you don't get along with. Focus on deep, attentive listening rather than waiting for that person to stop speaking so you can prove them wrong. Try to put yourself in their shoes and understand the world from their perspective. You may not agree with everything they say, but by listening deeply, as Yanai did, you're both acknowledging their humanity and expanding your own capacity for empathy and love. My husband wrote a poem for Yanai when he was in a rough period in life that ended in a sentence that Yanai adopted as his life's motto. Only at night do you see the stars. With his example as my beacon in the darkness, my star in the night sky, I say, if one person has a right, then every person has a right. If one person has a duty, then every person has a duty. If one person deserves compassion, every person deserves compassion. If one person's life is sacred, every person's life is sacred. If you sanctify the other, you are sanctified.